Is anybody excited to discuss transitioning from engineering leadership to product leadership? Yes, there we go. Amazing. Well, we have two incredible people up here to be in conversation, Nick Caldwell and Christian McCarrick. I'll be introducing Christian, our moderator, and then he'll then introduce Nick. Christian is the Vice President of Engineering at Auth0, managing a rapidly growing, globally distributed engineering team. Is anybody a part of the globally distributed remote workforce? Raise it high and proud. He is your guy. He hosts the popular podcast SimpleLeadership and interviews top tech leaders to help manage, grow, and succeed. He's a huge advocate for remote working, hence the shout out, specifically for supporting technology leaders in the remote workforce. Let's give Christian a round of applause.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you. And introducing my fireside chatter here, Nick. Nick is the Chief Product Officer at Looker, and they're creating a powerful platform for building modern data experiences. Prior to joining Looker, he was the VP of Engineering at a very small, obscure web company called Reddit. Some of you might have heard of it. He helped quintuple the engineering team at the world's fourth most popular website. Right? He also spent 13 years at Microsoft, culminating in a role as General Manager of the Power BI product suite. Nick holds a degree in computer science and electrical engineering from MIT and an MBA from UC Berkeley. He's also a board member of DevColor, a nonprofit whose mission is to maximize the impact of black software engineers. And I've actually had the pleasure of knowing Nick for a couple of years now, and what his bio doesn't say is Nick's a really awesome person, and he really does care a lot about his engineering teams and engineering leadership in general. So welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Christian. Hey, guys.
So again, great to see you again, Nick. We've had the pleasure of having a couple of conversations.
Christian is the first interview I ever did, by the way. He's not saying that, so I've known him for a long time. Really good guy.
So today's topic, obviously transitioning from engineering leadership to product leadership. The path, I think, to becoming a product manager and then a product leader is not always as straightforward as saying becoming a software engineer, right? So there's lots of different ways, lots of different paths to get there. Right now, is anyone in the audience considering moving from engineering to product or has moved from engineering to product already? A couple people? Okay. So Nick, you recently made the transition from the VP of Engineering to the CPO at Looker. So what has been the biggest difference in your day-to-day between running engineering at Reddit and then being the CPO at Looker?
Oh, man, there's massive difference. That's going to be hard to summarize. In one universe, I'm selling cat pictures. In the other universe, I got to put a suit on to go to work. I think with respect to managing engineers versus product, which is I think what you wanted to get at. Yeah, I mean, the day-to-day of managing an engineering team has to do with the details of people, resources, timelines. Like engineering managers manage engineers, so you have a much larger pool of people that you have to deal with, and that is what you're managing as an engineering manager. So you ever wonder why they call it product management? In product management, there's a similar sized pool of people, but they're not in the building. So as a product manager, you're continually trying to synthesize what's going on in the market, trying to do competitive analysis. You're meeting with the PMM team. You're talking to like endless customers. And your job is to kind of synthesize all that down ultimately into a roadmap. If you're a general manager like me, you synthesize it into an organizational structure that then gets deployed down into your organization so that you can execute and build product. So fundamentally, I now spend, this hurts my heart a little bit because I'm an engineer at heart, so there's no PMs in here to offend, right? But I just have more satisfying conversations when I talk to engineers. It's my natural.
This is being recorded, Nick.
Oh, God. Sorry, PMs on my team. But I think for me, I have to get out of my comfort zone, and for me that means like I'm introverted. PMs tend to be a little bit more extroverted. It means trying to push out of my boundary, go proactively, try and spend time with customers. That's the fundamental difference in my day-to-day.
Mm-hmm. Now, is there anything that, now that you've moved from product to engineering, is there anything that you wish engineers knew, right, or understood better now that you're on the product side?
I mean, yeah, there's a whole lot. I think I'll tell a story about myself. I mean, I came up through engineering, so I believe it was like 6 years into my engineering career before I even understood that there were other disciplines required to make products. I thought, like, in my head, you just code, question mark, question mark, question mark, something happens, right? And then, you sell the product. I was at when I was at Microsoft, they had kind of a high potential program for top employees, and I went to this thing, and it was the first time that they like kind of forced me to talk to other disciplines. And the person at my table was this woman who worked on the legal team. And I was talking to her about, what do you do? Like, you don't code anything. You can't possibly be useful. So what she told me was she was on a team of 4 people who were pursuing patent lawsuits against Android for infringing mobile technology. And they had won. And you guys may not know this, but for every Android device sold, Microsoft gets a portion of that. This 4-person legal team is responsible for like billions of dollars of Microsoft revenue. And that was kind of like a, wow, like other people can make the business successful. And it caused me to go back and think about my interactions, not just with the PM team, but I started to proactively schedule meetings with PMM. I did some visits to the sales team. I started to be like, wow, what is all of this stuff you have to actually fit together to make a product work? I foolishly, years later, got an MBA. That's how interested I got in this. So anyway.
Great. And one of the things I hear people often talk is the move to product. You shift your focus from the what to build instead of the how to build. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. I think why is also an important.
And the why.
I think as a product leader, like why is maybe even more important. I spent most of my time talking with PMs and customers about the strategy. If for those of you guys who are in enterprise, like strategy matters a lot. Like if you're in consumer product, that's kind of like gambling. If you're in an enterprise product, that's like chess. You got to very clearly articulate your strategy to the marketplace. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And then more importantly, I mean, because I come from an engineering background, like it's just my belief that if you can like explain the why to the engineering team and get them motivated, you end up hitting this kind of like what I call blue flame. You want the business objectives to be aligned with like the personal objectives or of the people on your team. And if you can get that intersection, you get the blue flame. So being able to explain why, not just to your customers, but to also the engineering team and the people spending their day to day is really important.
So one of the things to bring up too, there's a lot of information if you search on Google about becoming maybe from an IC engineer to like just a product manager. There's less information about going from say an engineering manager or an engineering director over to say director of PM or even higher in the product organization. Do you have any steps that you would recommend for someone that's an engineering leader or a manager going into product?
Man, this is so difficult. Like I don't have any formula for this other than to say this is like the most difficult aspect of my career. So like I came up through engineering and managed through all sorts of chicanery and like going to get an MBA to manage to convince the rest of the world to take a shot at me as a product leader. When you get into engineering or any field in general, like people want to put you in a box. Like I'm sure you all carrying around like business cards or LinkedIn, you got like a specific title. People assume so much about you and what you're capable of just by looking at that title. And I spent a good proportion of my career like just fighting that perception. So, I was at Microsoft when I became a general manager. That was 12 years into my career. In order to get someone to take a bet on me, I did all the proactive work about meeting with sales and meeting with other disciplines. I proactively reached out to executives at Microsoft with product pitch ideas, even though I was within engineering, not because I thought they would accept them, but because I wanted them to see that I was capable of pulling them together and also it helped build the network. I went to get an MBA because I wanted to prove to my executive leadership that I was really willing to commit to the change. I did all of this stuff. And then on top of that, I had to wait for like the right moment for a reorganization. The right opportunity came along. So it's like hard work, luck, just managing perception.
So you've mentioned a couple of times you've had an MBA. Do you feel that has helped you? I mean, certainly maybe at Microsoft or on smaller companies. Would you recommend anyone here to actually go down that path?
I would never wish an MBA on anyone. Now, if you has it helped me? Yes. My wife's in the front row here, and I think she knows what I went through to get that MBA. So I'm not gonna. It's a lot of work, and I got my MBA while I was still working full time. So every weekend for 3 years, I flew from Seattle down to Berkeley to get that degree. I'll be honest, like it is what triggered my move into executive leadership. So in that respect, it was very valuable, but it was incredibly hard work. It was very, very expensive. I just fundamentally can't recommend anyone doing it because it's so difficult. You have to be in the right place in your career. You have to be ready to jump. You've got to be the kind of person who likes formal education versus doing other things which might give you the same sort of experience. The most important thing about an MBA, for me anyway, it's like it is a forcing function that gets you out of your comfort zone. So you remember at this point in my career, I'd been like an engineering leader for like 11 years straight. And I was very afraid about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I knew something needed to change, but I wasn't like quite sure what to do. So getting that MBA, one, you're paying like a assload of money. And then two, you have to show up and learn new skills once a week for years. It forces, whatever your comfort zone in, it forces you straight out of it. And that was the value I got out of it, paying me to get out of my comfort zone. Now, if there's other ways for you to do that that are less expensive and maybe less threatening to your home life, I would strongly recommend you find those as opposed to an MBA.
Great, thanks. One of the things too, when shifting roles or shifting sort of paths in your career, sometimes you have to take a step lower, right, than being parallel. Do you think that people should expect to take a lower position? Like if you're a director, become a manager, should people expect potentially a pay cut at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, a pay cut, wait a second, man. Whoa, you changed the question at the last minute. No, never expect a pay cut, don't do that. But you may be compensated in other ways, like equity. But no, like as you kind of craft your career, you must think about patching together experiences to build your overall picture. It is extremely rare that you will find a job where it's like the pay is right, the scope is right, the product is right, the people are like, it is so rare to find all of that in one place. So don't wait for it, that's my advice. Think about what skills you need to pick up, and don't hesitate to go find new opportunities and pick those skills up. And if once you do that, it's fine to go somewhere else. I think like when I think about my career, it's a patchwork of experiences that add up to something that's really great. And I may be in that mentality because I kind of came out at Microsoft. I was at Microsoft for forever. And I am now just frankly rebelling against the idea that you stay in one place for a long time. I was at Microsoft for way too long. And now I just think about my career, particularly in the Silicon Valley area where there's so many opportunities. Why would you wedge yourself to just one place forever? Like patch together something that's interesting and beautiful over time.
Cool. You know, I just noticed, I think they put Nick and I together because we're the only two people that actually are in sports coats in our bio pages. It's kind of a rarity in Silicon Valley.
Where's yours, man?
I'm not wearing it today. So one of the things, too, I think maintaining engineering respect and credibility is harder as you go up the ladder. Even as a VP of engineering, like maintaining that credibility for your core ICs becomes harder. Now, moving to product, I would imagine that becomes even more hard, right? How do you maintain that credibility with your engineers coming over to the product org?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate in that like I came up through engineering, so I have less of a challenge there. But like, if you haven't come up through engineering, it's actually not that difficult. Like engineers, particularly the prickly architect types, just want to be heard. I'm serious, y'all. Like building credibility, literally for like 90% of the time, simply means like listening to their opinions and having formal mechanisms to do this. And you'd be surprised like how many companies don't just set up basic infrastructure. Like, do you have an architect committee? Do you have guilds to talk about particular technologies? If you're in product, do you attend those meetings and like show interest? I mean, engineers are not expecting product people to get all the way down into the lowest level of details for the most part. Like there are certain products, I know you work at Auth0, so it's probably a little bit different, but there are certain products where, yeah, you do need a highly technical PM. But in general, engineers are looking more for like, listen to what I'm saying, empathize with me, and don't hit me over the head with insane roadmaps. Let's work together to craft those roadmaps.
Awesome. I have a question for the audience. Does anyone here have a career path that ever wants to take them to be a CEO someday? Anyone think they want to go down that path? Right, a couple. Now, question, do you think going up the product leadership path is a better track than the engineering leadership path to become a CEO someday?
I mean, I think it's a little bit easier in general, but it sort of depends on the product that you're trying to build. If you're building like a more developer-oriented product or something that's like highly technical, I think ultimately it depends. Getting into the CEO track, going back to what I said earlier, it's about more than product, and it's not just product and tech. Like when you're a CEO, you build a whole company. So if you've only limited yourself to thinking about the end product and design aspects of it, you are literally missing like half the business. That's what I would say. So if you want to be a CEO, maybe get a little bit less comfortable than just talking to the PM team and go talk to sales. I've learned so much about sales this year at Looker. We have a crack sales team. The level of sophistication that they put into the organizational structure, their planning, the thoughts of how they set up incentives and SKU strategy is on par with how I would design engineering and product organizations. There is a lot to learn in that part of the world.
Awesome. So I think we're going to transition now to a little bit of Q&A. A couple ones up here. I think we'll start with the top one. How do you...
You got to read. I don't have good eyesight.
I got this. So how do you develop product sense as a tech leader? So if you're a tech leader, how do you, as you mentioned before, how do you start getting into the product side?
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty straightforward. If you're an enterprise, it's actually really, really easy. So in enterprise, generally industries are hyper-analyzed. So I'm working in the BI space right now, and I work, if you want to learn about BI, for example, you go read Gartner or Forrester. There are whole industries around analyzing the product space for enterprise products. For consumer, it's a little bit harder. You have to do two things, I would say. One is learn how to empathize with customers. Empathizing with customers, I don't mean just like, hey, go talk to customers every while. This is a systematic process. So very specifically, if you'd want to learn something I think that's modern and relevant, there's a technique called the design cycle. It'll teach you customer empathy and how to systematize learning customer pain points. And then more than that, no matter what you're doing, use the products in a real way. Like nothing beats like pretending you're the customer and trying to solve some specific problem. Like put yourself in the customer's shoes and you will figure out what the problems are pretty quickly. And then I guess also don't bring your biases to the table while you're doing all of this. I think product leaders tend to have a solution in mind first. That's not a good idea. You want to empathize with the customer needs first.
Okay, the next one that's up here is, gets a lot of votes here. What are the 3 musts and the 3 no-goes for a product leader?
Oh man, you put me on the spot for 6 things. It's a tough question. I think for a product leader, number 1, you must spend a significant amount of time with customers and your sales force. You must be able to convince engineers and the broader team as a whole that your vision makes sense to inspire them. I think product leaders have to be inspirational. For no's, this may be a personal bias because I'm an engineer, but I really don't like when, I'll say, if I see my product team jumping into the back of the kitchen, I get a little bit upset. I like to have a separation between what engineers are good at, which is like actually building shit and like thinking how it's gonna get done, and product, which is like supposed to represent the customer. When I see product like jumping into the back of the house, could you please just trust your team? And then the final thing with product leadership, don't come to the table with the solution in mind. I think it's funny, like you get really good ideas as a product leader from talking to eng design, like the team that's around you as well as customers. So I think like you have to be really good at synthesis, less good at just coming with a solution up front.
Okay, I'm gonna jump down to the third one here, which I think is pretty good. You mentioned it before in the talk. How do you explain the why to the engineering team, right? What are the important things for you to get across why an engineering team should be building this and get excited about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of techniques to use this. I could just share with you my favorite. The first one is kind of your basic. Engineers love to hear about your company's position in the market, the overall strategy, et cetera. And the reason they love that is because I've been an engineer, you guys all know this, you'd be surprised how neglected engineers get when it comes to being shared this information. Like, never treat your engineering team like they're just in the basement and you're lucky to get anything, engineers. I bring them in way up front. So like when we're doing quarterly planning, it's like we bring in engineering leaders to sit right next to product, and we talk about strategy, our position in the market up front. Now the other thing I would say that really gets people, not just engineers, maybe this is universally true, but engineers also don't get as much face-to-face time with the customer, particularly as you scale up. So when I was at Microsoft's a gigantic company. I literally didn't see any salesperson or customer for like 10 years into my career, that was like a different universe as far as engineering was concerned. When I became general manager of Power BI, once a month, we brought actual customers into our team all hands to talk about their pain points to the entire organization, and satisfaction from the Eng team skyrocketed. I mean, they love hearing directly from end users like what the pain points are. So I would say connect your engineers to the strategy, and then as you're proceeding, connect them to the customers, and I think that helps them understand the why it matters.
Yeah, I'm going to second that one too. I think creating as much empathy as you can create for your engineers, for the customer is huge, right? And that's awesome, right?
Yeah.
I definitely do that. I think last question here, it's around roadmaps. Roadmaps always a little controversial, especially with engineers who just want to build cool stuff and products telling them what you're going to build in Q1 and Q2. Yeah. What's your view on roadmaps and how do you put them together?
Yeah, first of all, you have to have a roadmap. Lack of a roadmap can lead to all sorts of systematic problems. The simple existence of a roadmap is like a great basis for communication. In terms of constructing a roadmap, there's lots of different techniques. It would take me a while to explain, but I think you start with strategy, like the high-level mission that you want to have. You break that down into themes. At the lowest level of detail, I think you have to ground out. When someone asks for a roadmap, they don't just mean like a generic list of stuff that you want to do in the year. I get it all the way down to like Q1 or the next 3 months must be very accurate as you can imagine. We would say 80% plus accurate. Like, let's really nail this. Q2, less accurate, but we better have a good idea. Anything that's in Q3 and Q4 is effectively saying we're not doing it, but it needs to be on the roadmap so I can have an answer for the CEO or the board. Anything out past 6 months, I think, is unpredictable. And then you just simply set the expectation that you're going to rev the roadmap once a quarter.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everyone here. Thank you very much, Nick, for
Thanks,
your time.
guys.
Appreciate it.